This week on LTC News, the clock is ticking on plastic bags.
So many people might say, well, it's just a plastic bag, what's the big deal?
Go Riverhawks!
We've got a group of seniors who won the Hockey East title as freshmen, and they want to do it again this year.
And stopping the measles virus.
It can tend to just grow. We're trying to contain it as early as we can.
Stay with us. Welcome to LTC News. I'm your news anchor, Alanna Flood. On November 10th, a child was diagnosed with measles at Lowell Community Health Center, and another case was diagnosed there on November 15th. This is very unusual and troubling, as the measles virus can be transmitted through the air and can live in the environment for 2 hours after the infected person leaves. The Lowell Health Department and the Community Health Center immediately jumped into action to reduce the likelihood that the disease would spread further. Dr. Randy Berkowitz, Chief Medical Officer at the Lowell Community Health Center, explains how they dealt with the cases.
We had 2 patients, and to the best of our knowledge, they did not overlap here at the center, who have been diagnosed with measles. We've had very coordinated efforts with not only the Lowell Health Department, but with the Department of Public Health and with Lowell General Hospital. We've been on multiple phone calls a day throughout the events, coordinating our efforts to make sure that people who were exposed come back in and get vaccinated, and that we ensure that there is decreased risk of spreading of the measles virus.
Well, there are only 2 cases, but it's a big deal because there are hundreds of people potentially exposed just at the health center location. So if this continues to expand, then you can find it out in the community. We've already known there's been an exposure at TJ Maxx in Chelmsford. There's been an exposure at the Walmart in Tewksbury. So it can tend to just grow. We're trying to contain it as early as we can.
The good news is that you've been exposed to measles. There is 72 hours that you have to get vaccinated. So the health center has went through our list of all the people who were in the building at the noted time frames. We made hundreds and hundreds of phone calls to all of those who were exposed, and we had a very dramatic response. The Department of Public Health was just amazed at the number of our patients that actually came in to get vaccinated.
We have to try to identify anyone who may have been in contact with them during their infectious period and track those folks down, find out if they've had 2 vaccinations or perhaps just 1, or if they've never been vaccinated, in which case we want to get them vaccinated. And if they're in a high risk group, they might even receive intravenous gamma globulin.
So measles, for the most part, for most people, is a self-limited illness, but where people can run into trouble is if they're pregnant, immunocompromised, meaning they have some trouble with their immune system, or for infants less than 1 year of age. People normally would tend to become symptomatic about 10 to 12 days into the illness after the time of exposure. And so the period of when people are contagious is approximately from days after exposure, day 5 through 21.
Vaccination is always the smart thing to do. So if you don't know your vaccine status, you should call your doctor or try to find out if you've had 2 MMR vaccines or if you've ever actually had the measles. If you haven't been vaccinated, you haven't had the measles, you should get vaccinated. That's the best way to protect yourself. And if you do come down with the symptoms of measles, which are cough, red eyes, runny nose, fever, a rash that starts 2 to 4 days later, if you do come down with those symptoms, don't go to the health center, don't go to your doctor's office, and don't go to the emergency room. Call for advice, because if you do have measles and you go somewhere, you're just exposing people all over again. So you want them to know you're coming so that they can be prepared to meet you and isolate you, so you'll decrease the risk of spreading measles.
According to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, there have been about 220 confirmed cases of measles in the U.S. in 2018. The majority of people who got measles were unvaccinated. Get ready, on January 1st, the plastic bag ban takes effect. That means no more single-use plastic grocery bags will be available at checkout counters in Lowell. Suzanne de la Dernier, recycling volunteer for the city, tells us why the ban is so important.
Primary reason is because of the environmental harm that they cause. They're called single-use plastic, and single-use plastic gets used for an hour, maybe, and then it lasts for 20 to 1,000 years. So many people might say, well, it's just a plastic bag, what's the big deal? Well, plastic bags in the aggregate cause a lot of environmental harm. So they're very lightweight. That's great when you're carrying groceries home, but when they blow around, they end up in the trees. That's not so great. When they go down in the rain, they end up clogging storm drains. They estimate that they could last from 20 to 1,000 years. Nobody's really sure because we've only had plastic for a few decades. Styrofoam, which is not a bag, but sometimes you see the styrofoam clamshells or whatever, those are estimated to last up to 1 million years. They end up on the beach, so that's a problem. It's unsightly. They can end up in the water. Many people have heard about the Pacific Gyre, which is near Hawaii and California. It's a big swirling mass of trash, mainly plastic, and that stuff can hurt lots of different kinds of animals. Sea turtles get very confused. They've had 100 million years or something of eating jellyfish, their favorite, and jellyfish kind of look like a bag hanging upside down. So they make a mistake, and then they eat the bag. It kills them, it fills up their stomach, they starve, they drop down in the ocean, they die, and then the bag eventually, as they decay, will float free and it can choke another turtle. So most people are very familiar with the bins that they put out at the curb, and those bins can take plastic. It's well known, we've been doing it now for more than 20 years. So the kind of things they can take would be cans, aluminum cans, steel cans, glass, things like that. But what they cannot take is plastic film, and here's why. All of those objects go onto a conveyor belt with gears, and if you put a film bag on there, it's kind of like if you've ever worked on a photocopy machine and gotten paper jammed. You have to stop everything, pull out the little bits of paper, and it's very annoying and time-consuming. So that's why the film, the plastic bags, and other similar materials have to go into a different way. And all the other things that are made out of polyethylene film are compatible with that, and that's why the t-shirt bags have been going in bins at the store. You come back to the store and you bring your bags and you put them in the bin. But now that the t-shirt bags are going away, it opens up an opportunity to recycle other similar objects. I know some people might be going, oh no, how am I going to carry my groceries home? It's very inconvenient. But it's also a style opportunity. You can kind of pick some bag that you really like, and you can keep it, and there's a lot of different ways to get them. As far as keeping the bags, I had to train myself to put them near the back door where I go out so that the bags will be at the ready. When I leave the house, I put them in my car.
Suzanne is available to speak to groups about single-use plastic bags. Contact the city's Solid Waste and Recycling Office. The UMass Lowell Riverhawks are always a great hockey team to watch, and as the season gears up with many new freshman players, Coach Norm Bazan has high hopes for an exciting, successful year.
We do have a big freshman group, but that doesn't take away from the fact that we've got a group of seniors who won the Hockey East title as freshmen, and they want to do it again this year. You're always seeing the future develop here first. And when you talk about Carter Hutton, you talk about Connor Hellebuck, you talk about Scott Wilson, you talk about Chad Ruedel, Christian Folan. They didn't play here that long ago. It was only about 4 or 5 years ago that they all played here. And you're going to be seeing a new crops of Folans and Hellebucks play here now.
Riverhawks goal scored by number 7, Kenny Hausinger.
But as a young team, and we're seeing a team that's developing and growing as the season goes on. We're seeing a team that's finding more consistency in their games each night out. But again, it's 60, 65 minutes of hockey, depending if you've got overtime or not, and you kind of can't let up on any shift. I'm kind of excited at the thought of what this team's going to look like in the second half of the season.
It's a league that has incredible parity. It's very exciting. There's a lot of quality amongst the league, and every weekend the winner has to be determined on the ice. There's no early picks for for any of these games because the parity's so strong.
One thing I like about this Lowell team at the moment is they got a number of guys that are going to be here 3 or 4 years, and I think that's good when you're building a program and when you want to be a consistent winner.
The Hockey East is 35 years young here this year, so it's exciting to be a part of that. I was here when it started as a player, and now here as a coach.
Since that time, it's been one of the more dominant programs in Hockey East, winning the Hockey East Championship in 2014, again in 2017, but also playing in championship games the 2 years in between. So they went to the championship game 5 years in a row. Hockey East came out of the, I guess, frustration that some schools had with the power that the Ivy League schools had in the ECAC, and led by Providence and BU and BC, and I suppose others would claim leadership roles. They split from the ECAC, forming what we know as Hockey East. You had Northeastern, BU, BC, Providence, New Hampshire. You had initially Clarkson and St. Lawrence as well. But by the time the first season came around, Clarkson and St. Lawrence had reversed their position and stayed with the ECAC. UMass Lowell and the University of Maine had been added to Hockey East, and that's what you have in the first season. And for the Riverhawks, that would be their second year as a Division I program. They had played the previous year as a Division I independent. That came after 3 national championships in Division II.
There is blocked rebound. Oh, what a save! Oh my! Hernberg somehow reached out, and he gets the bow.
I can assure everyone who comes to a Riverhawk game this year, they're going to see a hard style of play, an aggressive puck pursuit, a very aggressive forechecking style. And it's exciting to watch, and it's certainly exciting for these kids to play. We've got a venue that's second to none. The Songus Arena is a spectacular arena. It's very comfortable. There's not a bad seat in the house, and I think people would be delighted to be able to take in the Riverhawks this year.
Check out the Riverhawks website for everything you need to know about the team. Their season ends in March. In this week's Sunspot, Lowell Sun Enterprise Editor Chris Scott sits down with his boss, editor Jim Campanini, who is retiring after 30 years at the paper. Stick around after the Sunspot for a colorful look at this year's City of Lights Parade.
With me, I have a special guest. He's not a politician, and you could call him a wine enthusiast. But unfortunately, I have with me a retiring from the Lowell Sun, Jim Campanini. Jim, thanks for coming in today.
Chris, thank you.
Yep. You be a little bit enthusiastic.
I am. I'm very enthusiastic. I'm thinking I have, as we do this, I've got about 28 hours left on the job. Yeah. Okay.
And when we were driving down here together, you said being interviewed by me, you likened it to what?
A colonoscopy. Yeah, but now they put you out so you don't feel anything, you know. But that's a tribute to you. I've worked with you for a long time, 30 years. I started 30 years, and you were here before I even got here.
I was.
You know, so it's been a tribute working with you.
Likewise.
And Tom Zupa, Chris Bazarek, and all the others at the Sun. I mean, this last 2 weeks, I've received a lot of emails from people who used to work at the Sun. It was very gratifying.
Did I hear you say you got one from Rob Gavin?
No, I go from Glenn Johnson, Andy Ravens, Grant Welker, Lyle Moran, and the people in the industry I've worked with. And you know what? In all my replies, I was happy to receive the notes. But I said, you people made me look good all these years, and it's true. I mean, there's one thing about being a leader and these difficult times of the transformation for the newspaper, but it's the people who actually do the job. I've given what I consider to be the good direction, but it's the people who had to execute them. And that's why this Sun has been, I think, so vibrant and vital through all the years, not only because of me, but the good people that we've had working there, professional journalists, and now some of the most highly skilled journalists in New England. You know, who would have thought 2 years ago that our company, the Lowell Sun, would have been the leaders in acquiring the Boston Herald? And they were behind the times, as we've learned. They're following our model, our protocols for digital operations and collaboration. They were a single entity newspaper. They didn't have to share content like we did, develop content. And you know, I don't think the people realize that the Sun team was picked to get the Boston Herald, you know, after the bankruptcy, bring them along, and now they're in a position to survive and thrive. Okay, would have been.
We had a fairly productive partnership with them.
That's right.
So far.
That's right.
So I want to ask you, okay, your decision to retire has been a subject of speculation in the city for months.
Yes.
And we've talked about it off the record. You know, it was going to be in the summertime, then it was going to be in the fall. So when you had that meeting with the publisher in your office a couple weeks ago, I said, oh, here it comes. And when you came out, I wasn't surprised. But what I was surprised about, and what people have commented, is the quick turnaround, the 2 weeks.
Well, Kevin and I mean, when he first came on 14 months ago, you know, he's a new publisher. He should name his own editor. And at the time we talked, and he said, no, Jim, you're my guy. I was willing to go and start something then. And there was so much going on. And then, you know, we kept moving the goalposts.
Right.
I mean, I was going to, my wife and I had talked. There was the summer would have been a nice time, you know, and then the election was coming up, and we
We're in the
talked,
heat of a
Kevin and
campaign,
I,
yeah.
and he said, gee, why don't you stay till after the election? Then the election came up, and then why don't you stay till after the Christmas? And then, you know, my wife was right. She said, Jim, and then you're going to be in your budget season. He's going to say, so I went into Kevin. I had, you
Thank
know,
goodness for Mary Lee.
yeah, I mean, the election was exciting and everything else, and I'd never had a December off. It was time, you know. She basically convinced me, and I knew it was time because my thoughts were wandering. Okay, I've been doing the wine, and I've got other passions now. And
That means not only writing about it, but also drinking.
Yeah, and you know, I always said that when you reach a level of that you don't want to exceed anymore. I've always been a 100% guy, and my passions now are moving in another direction. And I've never had a December off. I said, wow, you know. So I think it was time. And meeting with Kevin, I mean. You know, when I go on vacation, he's even said it, the place runs smooth. So it's a pretty good operation. He's confident that the people like yourself can continue to do this until a new editor is named. So it's a good time. It's a good time, and I'm going to miss it. No doubt about it. I've had anxiety attacks in the last 2 weeks because I don't want to leave.
Your upper lip gets a little sweaty, as it usually does.
Because I don't, you know, I don't want to leave anything, you know, behind that still is in the working stages. But you know what? Ultimately, it's going to fall to you, Tom Zupa, Chris Mazak, to figure it out, and you people will. And it just, I can't think about those things anymore. And Kevin Corrado has told me the same thing, Jim. You know,
let me ask you. You've been at the Sun for a long time, and what if you had to pick a highlight? You know, the one day that you felt most rewarded by what was done in the Sun, or an editorial. Do you have one?
Well,
and then I want to ask you when you were most disappointed too.
Well, I've had I mean, personally, I've had a great career, all the accolades, the first Sun employee to win the Yankee Quill Award, the Rogers Editorial Award, best editorial in New England, selected by the Neiman Institute. I mean, you captured that in your story. There's not just one story, but I think the transformation we made when the industry was changing, and I came back from Denver, and you know, it was said, hey, we either get with it or we're going to be left by the wayside. And I think leading the transformation into the digital age, that's the future for our operation, as you well know. And I said it was amazing that we were able to train and get people going. I mean, there have been a lot of good stories, you know, and to think back on all of them, no, there's just so many.
Well,
but
on the digital transformation, what I've often commented on is, you know, here's a guy who's older, he's on in his career, but yet he could have kicked that one to the curb and said, I'll let that that for the next guy. As we know, some newspapers still have not embraced that, but you did embrace that.
Yeah, and you know what? I think it revived all of us, all of our veteran journalists. It created more enthusiasm, energy. And look at the reporters we've hired in the last 10 years. They're coming out, they're five-tool players. They can not only write a story, they can tell it on video, they can tweet it out. So we're reaching a broader market as our circulation numbers have shrunk. Look at we're read all over the world. I was saying this the other day. We get letters from people across the across the pond who read about local issues in Lowell and the surrounding communities that are affecting their communities. Plastic bags, opioid crisis. Okay, and they get the story first in the Sun because it's happening here or whatever.
What would you, looking back again over a distinguished career, what would you like to have accomplished that you don't think you hit? Is there anything that comes to mind?
No, you want to bring. No, I talked about this disappointment. The only real disappointment I have, both as an editor and as a resident of Lowell, was the high school issue. Okay, looking back, not where the high school ended up getting cited. It was over the entire process. That the city was fractured. That people who were good friends, some of them still aren't talking together. A lot of finger pointing and stuff. The city has to heal. But looking back, I said, maybe I should have been quicker to say, hey, this thing is going to lead to a lot of turmoil, and there should have been a third site. Maybe the South Common, maybe that building committee didn't give enough time to look at a third site, knowing that this was going to divide the city and stuff. I mean,
we did talk about that.
I know. And in the 21st century, they're saying, oh, there wasn't enough land there. Well, come on. You go to cities and urban centers, they're building up. We could have done it. Lowell has been creative in the past. So that is a disappointment on two things that it's too bad what happened to the city. I hope the wounds do heal. Good people come together, work together. And maybe as an editor, I didn't push hard in another direction. Hey, there's got to be, but that's all in hindsight now, knowing what has happened. I think it's terrible that they're taking a business out of Lowell, doctors and dentists, and eminent domain process, which has furthered this dissension. So hopefully it will all work out in the end, but that was a disappointment more than anything else that maybe we as a newspaper maybe should have
shown some more leadership.
Yeah.
But you know what? We talked about that, though. There was leadership lacking also from city government during that period. The sides were just so entrenched and dug in, and they couldn't see the forest through the trees. Tell us, moving forward now, what the next several months has in store for you and how you would like to spend your free time. You said you're looking forward to having a December.
Yes.
Where you don't have to come to
I'm
work.
going to travel. I'm going to the Midwest, connect with my sister, my nieces, cousins, my daughter's in Lexington, Kentucky. She works in Cincinnati, and I'll be back before Christmas. And then in January, the wine goddess and myself, my wife, will either she wants to go visit some friends in Florida. I'll take January off, and then by the time February comes, I'll be going to North Carolina with my brother. He has a place there, play a little golf, and then I'll start the second act of Jim Campanini, which like an Italian opera.
Like a politician, you're talking about yourself in the third person.
Yeah. No, well, I've got a second act planned. I mean, I'm not going to retire and sit on the couch.
Right.
I'm going to be doing some things, and right now I'm just sorting all those things out right now. What exactly do I want to do? But it'll be something that won't be full time. It'll allow me to do what I really like, and that's continue to do my wine studies. Okay, I'm getting into champagne right now, studying champagne. So that's the next class I'll be teaching at Middlesex Community College.
We'll only have about 60 seconds left. You've seen the good side of Lowell. You've seen the bad side of Lowell. As you depart, what advice would you have for political leaders and for the business leaders in the nonprofit sector, all of which play a key role here in the city? about getting it together?
Well, you know, my advice days are over, okay? I don't want to give it advice. I want to tell the people that throughout the years, and I said this the other day with Teddy Panos, I think Lowell should be proud that it's had some really good leaders. We've been blessed, okay? They haven't always agreed together, but the State House delegation, the city managers, the people who serve on boards, for the most part, they've been very, very good, okay? And I think that we have to continue to make sure that that happens in the future. The election, the power of electing people means a lot, okay? Lowell has lost a little of its vitality, okay, but I think there are still a lot of good people here who are enthusiastic about the city, as I am myself, and I think going forward, that's all it really needs, is to continue to work together, and Lowell will be fine.
Do you have an appetite to serve in elective office at all?
No, I do not. Anyone who vote for me should have their head examined.
Well, Jim, it's been a pleasure working with you over these years. We've had our battles, but we've also had our hugs, and I've enjoyed it from you, and I've learned a lot from you. Good luck in your retirement.
Thank you. Same here, Chris.
All right, sir. Thank you for tuning in to this special edition of Sunspot. We'll be back with the 81st show later in December. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Have a good night.
We'll leave you with a look at the 30th Annual City of Lights Parade that marched through downtown on Saturday, November 24th. Good weather brought the crowds. Here are some scenes from the parade that culminated with the mayor turning on the lights that illuminate the holiday season in the city. Thanks for joining us.
We've got the Lowell Police Department leading off the parade. It takes a lot to march in those uniforms. They are not warm, folks. Drill Team won the Air Force Nationals in Dayton, Ohio, and the Lady Raiders finished in 3rd place against other Air Force drill teams from across the country. Woo! Give a big round of applause. Round of applause. Woo! I saw Mommy's hands go Santa Claus. I know those munchkins. Hey, Santa. Tell me why. Hey, don't forget to wave. I wanna laugh, it would happen. Is that The Grinch just came by. Festival Gold Medal winner. They've also played for New York celebrations and New Year celebrations in London, performed national anthems for the Boston Red Sox at Fenway Park, and in July 2015 represented the Commonwealth of Massachusetts in the National Independence Day Parade in Washington, D.C. I see some fencing going on. You know, most theater departments warm up before their performance, but I think these guys are going to be warming up afterwards. Middlesex Community College joins us once again this year with its festive flow. We love our public schools, we love our teachers. They are good, and they did a nice job with their lights. I didn't hear any of that because I was totally distracted by these gorgeous animals. Are they mini horses? Now we got Draken High School Marching Band. Woo! The Draken High School Marching Minis performing all Draken High School football games. Here comes Santa Claus, here comes Santa Claus. Woo! Couldn't do it without his lovely helper, Mrs. Claus.
We're ready for the countdown.